and Ecumenism at St. Ignatius College, University College, Stockholm. And he's also a director of the Huffington Ecumenical Institute at Loyola Marymount University in LA. He was also a research fellow at Yale, Columbia, and also a visiting professor at the University of Munster in Germany. He is also an international fellow at Chester Ronning Center for the Study of Religions and Public Life at the University of Alberta in Canada. And the topic of his presentation today is the instrumentalizations of the Bible in the Russian war against Ukraine. Thank you, and so now it's your time.
Right, thank you so much. Let me start my presentation. Let me share with you my presentation. I hope I can make it. Yep. Seems
yes,
so.
we can
you see it? Okay. Right.
Yes. Great.
You can see it. Okay, good. Putin's regime in Russia has mobilized all resources to wage war against Ukraine, including the Bible. The Russian Orthodox Church has become the primary source of legitimacy for the regime itself and its wars. Its institutions craft a kind of theology that superficially resembles Orthodox tradition, but is fundamentally distorted. I would call it Z theology, because Z has become a major symbol of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. The main aim of Z theology is to justify what Russian propaganda calls this special military operation in Ukraine, which is often represented again by the letter Z. One such institution is the Moscow Theological Academy. This is the kind of logo of the Moscow Theological Academy. Situated within the main Russian Orthodox monastery, the Holy Trinity, and St. Sergius Lavra in Sergiev Posad, near Moscow, and tracing its origins to the 17th century, this academy has supported Z theology since 2022. All levels of academia, from undergraduate students to its leaders, have experienced unanimous support for the war. For example, one of its students, this guy, Ilya Cherkashin, won a national competition called Olympiada in theology. In an interview, he revealed that participants in the competition first had to choose a topic for their essays. Most of them, including Cherkashin, decided to explore their attitude towards war. In his own words, and I quote him, "When I was 17 years old, I held a strong opposition to war. However, during the process of working on my thesis, I was compelled to reconsider my position." So basically, from a pacifist, this young boy turned to a supporter of the war, from the theological premises. This apparent change in his stance undoubtedly contributed to the success of his essay in the National Theological Competition. So basically, in the National Theological Competition in Russia, those essays won the prizes that substantiated theologically the need for war. So imagine what kind of theology it is. The former rector, the principal of the Moscow Theological Academy from 2019 to 2020, where Ilya studied, Bishop Peterim Tvorogov, now of Skopinsk and Shatsk in Ryazan Oblast, is more explicit about his support for the war. He taught homiletics at the academy and used it in his sermons to indoctrinate students. He began one of his sermons with the words, "We gathered here to pray for the victory fervently." Then Peterim mentioned his visits to the occupied Ukrainian region known as Donbass. He went there with priests from his diocese, and this is a picture.
Во имя Отца и Сына и Святаго Духа.
Like a picture of him with the Russian soldiers in Ukraine on the occupied territories. In the same sermon, he claimed that he felt a special grace of God at the front line. According to him, he has not experienced such grace anywhere else, including Mount Athos or the Holy Land, Jerusalem. Peterim continued building his sermon by contrasting the criminals of the Wagner Group. You know, this Wagner Group is especially active in Africa and supports many dictatorships in Africa. And after 2022, it moved to Ukraine. So Peterim actually praised the Wagner Group. He claimed that its mercenaries, we know that its mercenaries committed numerous war crimes, including torture, executions, rape, forced disappearance, and more, both in Ukraine and across Africa. So they do the same in Ukraine and in Africa. In summer 2023, this group rebelled against Putin and was absorbed by other military units. For Bishop Peterim, however, they were literally saints. So he called them saints, those mercenaries. Meanwhile, those who dare to criticize Putin and his war are, in the bishop's view, are worst sinners. This is a typical trope of Z theology. Peterim crafted a form of biblical theology to justify this trope. In the same sermon preached to the students of Moscow Theological Academy, he acknowledged that some Ukrainians perceive the Russians as Cains. Indeed, on the first day of the invasion, the primate of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church under the Moscow Patriarchate, Metropolitan Onufriy Berezovsky, described the invasion as a repetition of Cain's sin. In response to such claim, Peterim argued that it is actually the Ukrainians who are the true Cains, while the Russians are the Abels. So imagine. To support his argument, he posed the question, if we are the Cains, then why do we receive such grace, and why are miracles happening on the Russian front lines? Peterim acknowledged that Ukrainians can also experience miracles because they are also Orthodox Christians. However, in his view, the Russian miracles are more frequent and more miraculous than the Ukrainian ones. Peterim concluded his sermon by asserting that Satan is the primary force behind the fratricide described in the book of Genesis. For him, the West represents Satan, who initiated and continues to support the Ukrainian war. Another prominent figure from the Moscow Theological Academy, its Professor Alexei Osipov, also emphasizes the apparently malevolent role of the West in the war against Ukraine. The piece of his sermon also kind of
Всех приветствуем, с вами Роман Голованов и
biblical theology that he develops. And he is one of the most outspoken Russian theologians who support the war and attempt to explain it theologically. In an interview in November 2022 for the TV channel Spas, I just showed you a piece of it, which belongs to the Russian Orthodox Church, also Osipov assumed, I do not doubt that there is a cult of Satan in the West. Apparently, all the leaders of the Western states participate in it. Only the members of such satanic associations can become leaders in the West. In Osipov's interpretation, the satanic West has compelled Russia into war. In an earlier statement, he had explained that those steps that Russia has taken now, meaning the war in Ukraine, are necessary. Thank God that Russia managed to launch the war at the last moment, when everything was already hanging over the abyss. He thus reiterated one of the main points of the Russian propaganda, that Russia initiated the aggression preemptively, just before Ukraine would launch its attack on Russia driven by the West. The Department of Biblical Studies at the Moscow Theological Academy plays a heightening role in promoting pro-war propaganda. Its chairperson, Father Alexander Timofeyev, has become a prominent voice of Z theology. That is him praying in the studio of the Spas TV channel. He travels to Donbass more frequently than Bishop Peterim to support the Russian occupants there. On his social media, he venerates the Russian military and depicts Ukraine as a Nazi regime. In a video broadcast that you can see on TV channel Spas, Timofeyev reads the prayer for Russian victory, composed by Patriarch Kirill. This is a piece of prayer.
Господу помолимся, Господи помилуй. Господи Божий сил Боже, спасение нашего, призри милости на смиренные рабы Твоя.
The prayer includes the words, Arise, O God, to help your people and give us victory by your power, which is biblical. Every priest in the Russian Orthodox Church is supposed to recite this prayer during the liturgy. However, some substitute the word victory with peace, and some even dare to omit it. Both actions are severely punished if reported to their bishop. So those priests who dare to pray for peace instead of victory, Russian victory, they are defrocked, basically. The church-owned TV channel Spas is entirely aligned with Russian state channels and promotes the war from the church's perspective. Similar to the Moscow Theological Academy, it functions as a testing ground where Z theology is developed and examined. There is also close cooperation between the two platforms. One result of this partnership is the documentary series War and the Bible, based on the book of the same name by Serbian bishop and Saint Nikolai Velimirovich. The series features two speakers, the channel's general director Boris Korchenikov, you can see him on your screen, and Father Igor Fomin, a graduate of the Moscow Theological Seminary and rector of the parish at the Moscow State Institute of International Relations. Episode 5 of the series is titled, "For What Reason Did God Condemn the Biblical Cities to Destruction?" referencing the book of Joshua. "And you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho, and the leaders of Jericho fought against you, and also the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And I gave them into your hand." It's chapter 24 from Joshua. This episode was filmed in Volnovakha, a Ukrainian city in the east that is occupied and destroyed by the Russians.
Интересный способ испытания веры. Пойди и вырежи, уничтожь народ.
Многие либералы сейчас скажут, нет,
This is the priest.
даже правитель не имеет права лишать жизни и так далее. Нас к этому долго приучать.
So, while standing amid the ruins, Father Igor, whom you just saw, mentioned that God gives a direct command to the Jewish people to cleanse the land from the peoples, who were impious and hence destined by God to go into oblivion, so that other peoples could be erected in their place. When asked how God, who loves mankind, could want his people to perish, even if they are impious, Father Fomin responds, "God does not think in the categories of human life. This is a liberal way of thinking. In contrast to it, God does not have limitations even when it requires that the life of an entire people. He does not hesitate to eliminate the peoples when they apostatize from him." As Father Fomin said these words, the editors of the film showed footage of a gay couple blessed by a priest somewhere in the West. You see this frame. Although Father Fomin does not explicitly state that the same applies to the Ukrainian people, he clearly implies it. While he discusses punishments from God, the editors inserted footage from Ukraine, including Kiev, from the days of the Revolution of Dignity in 2013-2014. Their message is clear. The Ukrainians revolted against God when they turned against Viktor Yanukovych's regime, which was then supported by Russia. For this reason, God sent the Russian army to punish them. Father Fomin claimed that Israel was no longer chosen when he abandoned Christ. Likewise, according to the film's narrative, the Ukrainians no longer merit God's mercy after they decided to abandon the Russian world. They are only deserving of ruins and destruction, which the film shows plentifully. However, this message aligns with Nazi propaganda during World War II, which claimed that God was behind the Shoah. Z theology concurs with the idea that the Wehrmacht was an instrument of God's vengeance, much like how the Russian army is seen as such in Ukraine. Thank you for your attention. This is a picture of, from Auschwitz, as you probably recognize, which had its own theology behind it, very similar to the Russian theology. So thank you again.
Thank you very much for your powerful as well as painful presentations. As someone from Myanmar, where the military regime is, killing so many civilians like the way Russia is doing for Ukraine, definitely yes, we share our deep solidarity with the people of Ukraine. And a few years ago, the people of Myanmar and Ukraine went to Washington, D.C., and they protest together and saying that they stand, in solidarity with one another. This is kind of like a life story that I could resonate deeply with my own context.
And I absolutely agree with that, because I've been to Myanmar. I visited Myanmar. I've seen, I taught also at the MIT, the theological institution in Myanmar, in Yangon. And I was really impressed by the strength of faith of the people there and of the deep depth of suffering of the people there. And I felt so much kind of really close to what we feel in Ukraine and to what people in Myanmar feel.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this reminds us that solidarity could go beyond the ethnic or national or religious boundaries. We have, this global solidarity with anyone who is in deep suffering. So thank you again so much for your presentations. So now we could open up for Q&A from the audience. Who would like to start raising some questions? We have good time.
If I actually may begin somehow.
Sure.
I just want to reflect on Joel's presentation. I think it's very important what is happening in DR Congo. Actually, I'll be in DR Congo in Kinshasa in November. I hope to also to teach about Ukraine at the Protestant Catholic Universities of Kinshasa. And I'm just reading a book about the colonial rule of Leopold II, which was really a horror. This was really probably the first genocide, even before the Namibian genocide in 1910. Also, I find so many parallels with the genocidal neo-colonial policies of Vladimir Putin. I know that he's very much appreciated by many in the global south because many people believe that he fights against colonialism. But he himself represents a sort of colonialism that Leopold II represented. Remember, Leopold II pretended that he was fighting the slavery. And he pretended to be like a pioneer, a protagonist of anti-slavery campaign. And he did the worst thing one can imagine in Congo. That's exactly what Putin does. He pretends to be a pioneer, a protagonist of anti-colonialism. And what he does in Ukraine is exactly what was happening in Congo under Leopold II.
Yeah. Thank you. Or if I may ask, the other two presenters like PC and